Hey, Chandra.
Hey G, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I am well as well.
We are here for another episode of Reflections from the Heart, where we look at the changing landscape of education. For those who don't know, I'm Gorgette Green-Hodnett.
And I'm Chandra Joseph-Lacet. And we are so excited to be here tonight, as always, as we share with our audience the amazing, amazing things that educators are doing in their various roles. And from Reflections in the Heart, we have the opportunity to talk to educators about how their roles have been changing over these past few years as, the pandemic continues, mid-pandemic, after pandemic. I don't even know what to call it anymore because
One thing I can tell you for sure, it's my first pandemic. I could tell you that.
mine too.
Okay.
Imagine that.
Mm-hmm.
And so tonight we have with us, hailing from the great state of New York, and I'm not biased about that at all,
I am.
is Kenney Robinson. And Kenney is the Director of Career, Professional, and Partnership Develop at the Hunter College School of Education. Welcome, 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 Kenney.
Good evening. Thank you, ladies. It's a pleasure to be on.
Good to
So glad you're
have
here.
you. Yes. I mean, you have this very distinguished title, and I'm sure you didn't just get that by happenstance. So, give us a little introduction about who Kenney Robinson was and who he is in this role at the School of Education at Hunter College.
All right. Thank you. Well, the role, I've been blessed. The role was something that I had the opportunity to work with a supervisor and the dean in the School of Education to come up with. So it was an idea I pitched and they were receptive to. They added some of their, pieces to it because I wouldn't have had all these pieces on it. But but you have to work. It was above my pay grade, some of those decisions, so I had to go with it. But it was more things that I liked that I didn't like, and after a while, I've learned to like the things that I didn't like initially. And that's the way of the world. Sometimes you have to get uncomfortable to get comfortable.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
But I like it in the sense that it's an amalgamation of everything. I could almost sum it up in like the last 2 days. Just real quick and concise. Just yesterday, met with my faculty working group. So it's a bunch of faculty from across different departments in the School of Education, just to get their ideas on things that are going well and feedback on, warm and cold feedback about how things are going with some of our initiatives in terms of we do test prep because a lot of our students need preparation for the teacher certification exams, in New York State, there's a set of exams, the EAS, educating all students. But different states have their set of exams, so I won't burden everybody with just New York State. But just letting them know that enrollment's going well with that, and those are services we offer to students free. Talking about infusing career, and I like to call it career literacy because we talk about literacy in general. If you don't know how to read or you're not literate in this world, it's hard to get around. If you don't have financial literacy, it's hard to get around when you're broke or you don't know how to spend your money. And so career literacy is the same thing, and it manifests itself in different ways at different stages. When you're in a school of education as somebody who's preparing to become a teacher for the first time, it's going to look one way. But if you're returning to get an additional degree or certification, it's going to look another way. And let me just add that we're a school of education. We don't just help prepare teachers. We also prepare counselors, people in educational psychology. We have a multitude of majors, an ad sub program for people who aspire to be administrators and superintendents. So it's not just teacher preparation, but I know that's the bulk, or teacher education, that's the bulk of it. So working with faculty, also with the staff. So I have staff who I give responsibilities. Somebody didn't do something that one of my supervisors needed, and I took the weight for it, but it's a lesson learned. And we talked it out, gave feedback, and she's somebody who aspires to work in education. So you have to give them responsibilities and sometimes let them fail when it's low stakes. And so just giving them that opportunity. Also, I'm helping with a search because I happen to have a nice network of people, and people always say, oh, it's hard to find Black and Latino and Asian educators, or just people in general, for opportunities. And I'm like, well, I have a great network. I'm happy, send me the search you're looking for, and I'll help you identify people. So speaking to a leader in one of our schools that we work with and identifying candidates, and she was happy with that. And then today, getting a call from a principal whose student didn't receive any notification of whether she was accepted in a Hunter or not. So of course she calls us because we're partners. And even though I don't work in admissions, I work across silos, which sometimes is people, look at you like you have two heads when you say, hey, I know somebody in admissions, or I know somebody in the president's office. And so I called my colleague in admissions, and they're going to expedite her admission. So those are the career aspect of it, the partnership aspect of it, the professional learning. So, it's just, I get to do a breadth of everything. And I don't go into depth with a lot of stuff. A lot of times it might be referrals. And, but I enjoy what I do. Oh, and then lastly, I'm on the vice chair of a board, the Each Harlem tutorial program. And during my working lunch, so I have to stress that during my working lunch, we had an accountability committee meeting and sitting on that. But the cool part about East Harlem Tutorial Program, or EHTP, as it's referred to, they're one of our partners. I helped facilitate a partnership where we have one of the first elementary residencies in the country, and now it's spiraled up to be a residency, not just for aspiring elementary educators, but now middle school and high school.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I thought the title was a mouthful. Now I understand why your title is so long. And so, Kenney, you mentioned that you actually created this job and this job description. And so I'm really curious if you can share with the audience, what made you do that? Like, what was it, as where you were, that you saw this need to create what feels like an entire department, right?
Some days it does.
So what made you take that leap? What need did you see in the School of Education that really made you think this is something that could really benefit a lot of people?
Well, and I have to give props to my supervisor, Matt. He, was willing to work with me. And, obviously there's some push and pull, but at the end of the day, I have to, give it up to him, because he didn't have to do that. I probably would have left Hunter, but, he didn't have to do what he did. So I do appreciate him and the dean, Dean Middleton, our dean, for working with me and seeing my vision. And, like I said, modifying it, but it was still enough where I was satisfied and I'm happy with what I do. And really, I keep aspiring to get better, because, if you're not doing something you love, you sort of get over instead of getting better. Mm-hmm. So it started when I started working at Hunter in terms of the School of Education in 2007. When I came in, I was director of adolescent and TESOL, or they refer to it as English ENL now, for placement. And so one of the things I noticed, how you come in and you don't just make wholesale changes. Well, most people shouldn't. You should really evaluate what's working and what's not working. And so after going through that, I saw some practices that I was like, okay, we can kind of continue this with some modifications. And then there was some other things. So we would place students in the field for field work experiences leading up to student teaching to prepare them, for transition into the profession. And so one of the things that they didn't do is it was just kind of like, well, Gorgette, you go here, Chandra, you go here. And so as we know as educators, there's high turnover, and a lot of turnover is based on fit, because a lot of people are prepared, but they're not prepared for the school that they came into because maybe their skills don't really match that school. And so one of the things I started doing was simply having students create a resume. So just by creating a resume, it gave me some insight to say, oh, Gorgette, you're a grad student and you used to major in woodwork. You know, we have a CTE, Career and Technical High School, that we partner with, and they do woodwork. So that might be a great fit, but not only a great fit, but a fit that could lead to employment afterwards. So just simply adding resumes to an application process transformed like the placement process. Also, having principals complete an application to say, these are the people who I feel like are the best teachers and why, to host, you know, candidates for student teaching. Because sometimes it's just, well, who wants a student teacher? It's like, okay, I'll take one. And you have no clue how, and you may have the best intentions or sometimes you don't. But, you know, I'm not here to judge that, but I just know if you don't have certain skills or traits, it's not going to be an effective placement. And even if you do have certain traits, sometimes it's good to have an interview process. So just, you know, really professionalizing the placement process. And so just as I started doing that, I realized across the board, people didn't do this in other departments. So I just kept saying I would love to do this for all candidates. So all candidates have, you know, the same opportunities to succeed and the same access, you know, equity. It's always about equity. So I just kept doing that, and I would arrange for the Department of Ed to come and, you know, do information sessions. But also, I started believing in mutually beneficial, sustainable partnerships. So a partnership, just like today with the school that I mentioned where the principal called me, I want a principal to feel like that's how, you know, they're benefiting from the partnership, because their students, not just our students, their students should benefit from the collaboration as well. And that's how you sustain things. And also that leads to opportunities. So it just opens up a world. It makes people feel good. You know, when partnerships are one-sided, it's like, why should I maintain this partnership? So just really making sure partnerships were mutually beneficial and sustainable and vetting. So just a set of good practices that, you know, all the KCREP and all the certification organizations say are good practices, just really doing that. But then after a while, and just the career work started really coming at me more and more. We would add fellows programs. We had a residency partnership with New Visions. And so just really doing a lot of career placement and career preparation and development work, and really helping people find the best fit for them. Because we know the best school may not be the best fit. And so really helping people find the best fit and, you know, doing mock interviews, getting principals, sending students to schools to get mock interviews. Also expanding their horizons. Not everything is focused, like in New York City, we have charter schools and we have the Department of Ed and we have independent schools. Sometimes everybody is just laser-like focused on the Department of Ed. And it's like, no, there's other options, and those might be the best options for you. And just even talking about compensation, quality of life, and just things, and just not going out and feeling like you have no ownership in this process. You know, I always have this little saying I tell my candidates: if you don't remember anything, desperation is not the way to find a house, spouse, or job. And so
I love that.
And so don't go out there desperate, because, you know, you'll take a job and regret it. And, you know, a school year, if you love going to work, you'll, you know, 180 days go by in a second. But if you don't enjoy or look forward to going to work, it could be a marathon every day.
Now, Kenney, is so much I want to say about what you said, and then I'm going to ask you a question. What I loved about what you said, there's two main things, and I know Chandra wants to say something, but I might not give her any time. One of the things is I love that you saw a need and you went forward to try to fill it. A lot of times we feel like this is we, the greater person, that says, oh, no one will listen to me.
Hmm.
Why should I even try? But what I heard and what you said was you just kept moving, filling the need, and what eventually happened was that you got your need met. So now you got to do this in a broader scale, which I can tell brings you great joy. So that's just some advice for folks. Don't forget his little quote about desperation, but also remember that you don't have to necessarily have to go look for a job. It's very possible that you could help to craft one, which is what Kenney's talking about today. The other thing is, I'm convinced that some of your very own experience as a teacher led you to some of the decisions. Can you share some of that with the audience?
Well, yeah, teaching. Well, first, I have to give props to, first of all, my parents who departed, but especially my mother, because, there's a couple of butterfly effects that if things don't happen a certain way, I'm not sitting in this position. And so what even led me to teaching, when I was in middle school, or junior high school, as they called it back then, I tested into Brooklyn Tech. And I tested in New York City. For New York City folks, that's one of the specialized high schools that you have to take a test. It's become controversial now because back then it was more of a meritocracy. You kind of take the test. They gave you this book. You studied the book. You went and took the test. And now, people pay thousands of dollars for test prep and everything. So it's not equitable. And so the number, it looked like the United Colors of Benetton when I went there in the 80s because it was just a little bit of everybody. But now you could count the number of Black and brown students there. So we have to change that. And it's complicated because Asian students do really well, and it's definitely not because of the economic advantage. So it has to be done in a thoughtful way. It can't be like, it has to be surgery and not butchery. Like it has to definitely be thought about with finesse and thoughtful and consider all, perspectives when doing that. But I digress a bit. So I passed the test, and I passed it so well that I tested in the honors English at Brooklyn Tech. But back at junior high school, my English teacher failed me from English. And so in my mind, just as now as an educator looking back, just the fact that seeing the kid made it to Brooklyn Tech would have been enough, and not only Brooklyn Tech, but made honors English in Brooklyn Tech would have been enough for me to say, let me reevaluate his grades. So even though he was a pain in my, a sugar, I need to pass him because clearly it was something between him and I that wasn't going, right. So just that, like, she could have looked in the mirror instead of looking at me under the microscope. And so just, like that experience. And then even at Brooklyn Tech, sometimes depend upon your preparation or lack of preparation thereof, it's where you could be a smart kid and all of a sudden you become dumb. Like all of a sudden I went from kind of knowing what I need to do to get 90s and 100s in every class except that English class in junior high school to it felt like it was Charlie Brown's teacher talking and everybody else understood and it was Charlie Brown's teacher talking to me. And so it was a struggle. And a lot of them just was like, well, you're at Brooklyn Tech. So that's where that hidden curriculum came in. So these are the experiences that I didn't know at the time would shape me and make me want to become a teacher. But it wasn't until New Paltz when, because of all the work I used to do in New Paltz, and shout out to all my New Paltz people, the Newts and everybody at New Paltz. The New Paltz family is deep. And Gorgette, I didn't want to become a teacher. And then finally I was in Albany and I found out about a minority recruitment program, took all the tests, passed it, and was like, I guess I'll try this. And then they told me it would pay for my loan. So you do teach 5 years, you get your loans paid for. But when I was a teacher, even when I excelled, it just felt like there was people and teaching. It's like it's not enough to be acceptable. You need to be exceptional, and I felt like I was becoming that, but I didn't feel that all around me all the time. And then by my third year, they had like this buyout. So all the veterans who kind of helped nurture me and grow, all of a sudden I was like a veteran and everything. And I had just got my tenure. I was a veteran. And then this is what happens to a lot of Black men and Latino men in education. They made me a dean because I could manage a classroom, but it wasn't really managed. I engaged students. I was able to engage students. So so it wasn't, because I always told students, I don't control you. I respect you, you respect me, and we make this work. Yeah, like you have autonomy in there. You got to work on your timing and your tone, but you have autonomy. All I am is, to quote Al Sharpton, is a thermostat and a thermometer. Like a thermostat in terms of knowing when to turn the heat up, knowing when to turn the heat down, but then thermometer taking the temperature of my students, and who knew that was SEL? It was just like that just felt like the right thing to do. So just seeing that and seeing like a lot of people who are getting better instead of getting over and making a lot of money, I always felt like if I went into a position where I could be a gatekeeper, if you worked with me, you wasn't going to go into the field like that. And so that, those are the experiences that kind of shape, me becoming a teacher. So basically I look at what I do now is doing it on a macro level, where when I was a classroom teacher, I did things on a micro level. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm full from what you're saying.
So you gonna let me say something? Because earlier you weren't sure if you were gonna let me in.
I wasn't going to. So now you can. Yes, I'm gonna let you jump in, sis.
Okay, good looking. Because I just have to say that I am beyond impressed with the fact that, you have developed a program that is serious about appropriate matches, right? Of student teachers and placements, and then after graduation, like to really think, hey, let me put a resume together. Let me find out what this soon to be teacher, right, is really interested in, what their background is, that sort of thing. And let me ask, there's an idea, this principal, right, what their needs are, and to see if there are some matches, as opposed to, we've got these partnerships with these 5 schools and you 3 are going there and you 2 are right. Let me just bring this back a little bit. It's feeling a little personal because my daughter is student teaching right now. So, I'm getting her experience, and it really is about, we've got these schools, y'all gonna go there. You need a first grade placement, you got a third grade placement. There was none of that conversation. So kudos, right? For that is pioneering as far as I'm concerned. And it shouldn't be pioneering in education, but we know, education, the wheels turn real slow. And so I am wildly impressed by that. Absolutely. And as a former administrator, I appreciate the thoughtfulness of it all, because every teacher is not appropriate for my then school. It does not make them a bad student teacher or a bad teacher, right? Like fit matters. It really does. Environment matters. And the fact that folks are taking some care to think about that beforehand is powerful. And that allows the student teacher or the teacher to know that I need to be thinking about this for myself, right? And as much as they're interviewing me, I am also interviewing them. Right fit is important. And wow, isn't that a concept in a profession where we are constantly losing people, right? And sometimes it really is about, a lot of times it really is about fit.
But Chandra, think about what you just said about your daughter's internship experience, where it really wasn't a conversation. So it almost can make our new educators just feel like that's just how it goes. There's no opportunity for there to be conversation. And that's when it then leads to the desperation conversation. Well, I didn't get to even pick my student placement, so why would I think I get to pick which school? Where some students, I shouldn't call them students, some new graduates, when they would come to interview, they don't even know the process. They're just going along as people are directing them. But then there are others, like your daughter will be. She'll have a guide to help her through the process. But what Kenny's talking about is that the university is helping to guide the process. And so I think that this is a win for the college and university, but even administrators, if you're listening, you might want to try to initiate these partnerships with the local university. Maybe you can start something like this to help, bridge the gap with those who are coming to work with your system or work in your school.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And the children and the profession wins.
That's right.
That's right. That's
what
exactly
it's all
right.
about.
Yeah. And if we talk about that we're going to be student centric, why can't we do it in our practices and model those practices in this setting? And also, it used to always take the accountability off of me, because if something went wrong, if Chandra said, "Oh, Gorgette is," I was like, "Well, you and Gorgette interviewed, and didn't y'all discuss this when you're interviewed?
That's
and
right.
y'all need to work it out."
Right.
And also, as we all know, and teachers sometimes can't help themselves, but sometimes teachers can be like bullies to new teachers. So, I always quote the movie Life: "Don't let them eat your cornbread." Like, don't, and so you have to advocate for yourself. And the desperation quote kind of came out, the Thoreau quote: "Most men live lives of quiet desperation, waiting for their voices to be heard." And so I always tell people, no, you need to advocate for yourself and have a voice. And yeah, if your principal or anybody does anything, hit them with an email, a well-written email, because now they know, oh, this person's producing a paper trail. So I need to, keep, be wary of this person. So you got to have voice. And how are you going to empower students? My job is to empower and inspire, and I expect the people, and I model that for them, and I expect them to do that for our young people, because how else are they going to take control of their lives and make decisions and be owners and everything? And also, we talk about entrepreneurship, but sometimes entrepreneurship can be within a job you have. So I felt like I was being an entrepreneur with my own destiny at the place I work, because I love where I work. It's nice. I could take my son to school in the morning, so I have a nice, schedule and everything. So, and shout out to my son. So why would I want to leave that? And also, sometimes when you have to be an entrepreneur, it's a glamour to it, but it's also a grind and a hustle when you're waiting for people to pay you. When, like, I'm in a pension plan. If my son wasn't 9, I could retire in a couple of years. But since he's 9, about 10, 12 more years. A few more there. Yeah. So those things are important too. And I'm not knocking people for being entrepreneurs, and I encourage that, and I love that. But we got to show the full story. We can't show the glamour part of it when it hits. We got to show sometimes it could be hit or miss, and some of the challenges that go along with the opportunity. So you could create kind of quasi entrepreneurships within, your place of work, especially if you do a quality job.
Mm-hmm. Love it. I love it. And I am struck by the innovation, right? Like that. And for me, it is absolute innovation. I'm just glad gone are the days when I came in and it was just, you got offered a job, take that job. Like, that's what you need to do. You just take that first job. You figure everything out after that. So I appreciate that. And thank you for that. And let's spread the word. I'm really, really curious as to, given COVID and given, right? So many teachers are actually leaving our profession, right? Over the past few years. And yes, we know that this has always been an issue, right? Between years 1 and 5, we lost folks, but this is a whole different deal going on right now, right? And even many schools of ed are having a really hard time with recruitment. So I'm curious as to how your job has shifted, right? If it has at all, right? And I'm assuming in some ways it has. How has it shifted in the recruitment of folks who are coming into this school of education? How are you thinking about recruiting them, retaining them, and preparing them for this brave new world of teaching that they are entering at this point?
Well, I feel, the profession's definitely changed. There there's shortages everywhere now, whereas before with certain areas there were shortages, even though in New York City, for some reason, childhood ed still isn't really a shortage area. So even with the pandemic, it was still a challenge to get a job if you were a childhood educator, because I think a lot of people kind of focus on that. I think it kind of gave us a time to be introspective and sort of scout ourselves and say what's working, what's not working, and also like thin out, but also say what are some new programs we can open. Also, how can we bring back students who are already committed to the profession to, get them to pursue another master's. If you're childhood ed, get a TESOL master's or get a SPED master's. So it was also reaching out to people that converted already and figuring out how to make things work even more effective and efficient for them. And also looking at other programs that don't necessarily require certification or even working in schools, because not everybody's destined to impact the lives of children by working in schools. And also counseling programs. Lord knows we need way more counseling programs, mental health, school counseling, rehabilitation counseling. So I think Hunter, the School of Ed in particular, we've started branching out. We have an Ed Psych program. People need evaluations. How do you know what you're doing is working? So evaluations, ABA. So, so just really looking at other programs and bringing in people in for, like SEL, we're looking at social emotional learning, even though it's become sexy because of the pandemic, even though it should have been really a priority years ago, because you know how they say kids don't care what you know until they know what you know that you care. So, so just like I do appreciate I work at a place where the faculty and staff, we work collaboratively, and there's a lot of people with vision and voice, and so we have people who make things happen, and I appreciate working among colleagues and peers who are about things, about making things happen and really being change agents, and also residencies. So, residencies is something that needs to be evaluated. But also, I just have to keep it 100. Sometimes we know the way society is set up, everybody can't be successful if it's, capitalism. And sadly, the people who look like us are the ones who usually end up at the bottom of the pyramid, and they let a few, matriculate to the top. So, and that's not me speaking for Hunter. That's just me speaking as a Black man in America. So that's something that I think we all have to really look in the mirror and say, hey, what are we doing to really, change outcomes? And because like teacher salaries, because even if we're recruiting them, it's hard to retain them. Like, and thinking about quality of life compensation packages, because teaching is the only profession where you have to get additional credentials. Police don't have to get additional credentials. Firefighters don't have to get additional credentials. Sanitation don't have to get additional credentials. So, we have to get additional credentials. And yes, we make more money, but because if you look at it historically, and sometimes this is the cool part about working in a teacher education as opposed to a teacher preparation program, teaching was more of a woman's profession, and the salaries reflect that. So how you want Black and Latino men to come in the profession, but if we we want families and different things in life, it's not paying to be in that position. So there has to be a radical reimagination of the role teachers play in society, and they're not glorified babysitters.
You said a lot. And the whole time you were talking about the different areas that the School of Ed has moved to, I was wondering, do you all have a policy branch of the School of Ed?
Yes. Oh, I forgot we have a EDD program. Thank you for even checked our website. But
you know why I thought of it? Because it wasn't until I met we had a person come and do math facilitation at my school. It was actually for the county. And in speaking with the person, I found out he was in a doctoral program for policy. And I was like, I never even thought about that. And then as I thought and I did research, there's not a lot of people of color that are engaged in policy. But when you think about the moves that are made, they are made through the avenue of public policy.
Yep.
And so I just bring that up because we're often thinking about teacher ed programs, or I should say, school of education, as just about teacher preparation. But it's greater than that. And we as educators need to consider opportunities that lie in public policy, as well as, taking courses, pursuing additional coursework in order to be knowledgeable about what's going on and what's really impacting our school districts.
Well, let me use this as an opportunity. Like, I love the School of Ed, don't get me wrong, but like talking about Hunter across silos. So for instance, my master's is in urban affairs and policy at Hunter College. So I did that program in a sense that was transformative for me, because one of the things I had to do in that program was I had to do an internship with a city council person. So I did it with council member Bill Perkins. And we talk about culturally relevant pedagogy, but sometimes we talk about it as like, this white person coming into, our communities. But sometimes we're the strangers in our communities as well. So even though I was born and raised in Harlem, I was born and raised at a time by parents who had a different value system. So by doing constituent concerns and working with Bill Perkins and like Cordell Clear, who's like now a major politician in Harlem, who I came up with, it really transformed me. So some of the things where I was just like, didn't really tolerate that in the same way, like, or have empathy, it gave me a new level of empathy. And it's like, how people now like talk about, we do homework, we don't do homework, we do classwork, and students kind of read. Like, you flip the classroom, like that made me flip the classroom. But like I said, I didn't think, there's a book in me called Don't Forget to Write. That's probably going to be the book. Because when you're doing these things, like one of the things I didn't do enough was journal about it. And it was just because you in the heat of the moment, like you're in battle, feels like, so you don't really have time to be as reflective as you should. That's why I love the title. And one of the principals who I told I was going to do this was like, I love the title. So reflect, we have to be more reflective. And also it's about, like, one of the things I do with people with resumes is sometimes when they feel like they can't do something, I have them do sort of a milestone map and kind of talk about the things they've overcome in their lives or accomplished in their lives to get to this point. If you came to this country and didn't speak a word of English, just the ability to speak, read, and write English is a milestone. Put that down. Or, just certain things you've overcome to get to this point. You could do way, way more, but sometimes you have to see it to believe it. There's self-esteem, but, you have to have self-efficacy as well. And so that's, some of the things that you have to do. But so I would definitely say sometimes, the ed policy, and like I said, we have a EDD and teacher leadership and policy, but it's really sometimes doing policy that's outside of education, because really dealing with the constituent issues and some of the issues Bill Perkins was dealing with as a council member really was transformative for me and just changed the way I taught. And it kind of reminded me of that Jay-Z. He has a lyric with this song, living life on a treadmill, always running in place, getting nowhere fast, a whole year's past. Because you expend the same energy on the treadmill that you do just running around, if you ran around a park or just ran around the city, but you don't go anywhere sometimes. And sometimes when you're in an under-resourced community and you don't have the educational or the resources, you still put the same love in and you want the same things for your kids, but you just don't have a way or the resources to accomplish that. And that just, like I said, gave me a greater sense of empathy. So, definitely, come to Hunt. I'm not telling you not to, but don't just look at the School of Ed. There's definitely other awesome programs at Hunter and other universities, because even with universities, don't forget we're a business too. So it's about finding the right fit for you at each of our respective institutions. But also that comes from knowing who you are. So a lot of times people don't really know who they are. So a lot of times I just try to help them define who they are. And then once you define who you are, you know where you fit and where you don't fit, and who you need to work with and who you shouldn't work with.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You know, I've been thinking a lot about ed policy and policy in general since the start of the pandemic, right? Because Gorgette and I started Real Talk, Real Time at the start of the pandemic because everybody was talking about teachers and about schools. No one was actually talking to teachers, right? And providing that space. And I had to think about why, right? Like, why is it? Why are our voices silenced yet we are doing the work? And I know that a lot of it has to do with the fact that, yes, and I agree with you, right? It is a largely female, right, profession. It also has to do with the fact that the real work, as I like to call it, because it is, happens at the ground level. But everything that affects the ground level happens about 5 levels up. And we're not in those spaces. We, meaning teachers, educators, counselors, nurses, those folks who are at the ground level are not in those spaces. And the people in those spaces haven't been in school since they were in school, right? But they are actually creating all this policy. And so I encourage, and I say all the time, it's not me, but I am encouraging people to think about, right, ways to enter political spaces, whether that is at your local union level, your local community level, your local school board level, whether it is DC, wherever it is, but to really consider as you continue to work in schools, because that's where you can maintain your perspective, right? Because if you're too far away, you lose your perspective. As you are in schools, and we all, educators could talk about education all day and have a lot to share and to vent about. What are you going to do about it? Is my now question to so many of my colleagues. What are you going to do about it? And some of what we need to do about it is around political action. It's totally around political action.
And even as educators who are parents and aunties and godmoms, we need to be involved as well. We need to use our voice. We need to educate. I remember, when my kids were coming up, going to school board meetings or going to parent teacher PTA meetings, and the parents and families didn't really know. They just were fussing. And then I could say, well, that's really not the case. And they say, really? But it was because I was a mom who was an educator who could. I remember the big one when we were having Common Core and they just were going off. And I'm like, but aren't you going to want your kids to go to college? Aren't you going to want them to be prepared? Like, don't look at it just from the negative lens. Look at it for what they're trying to do. Get educated. They were just wrong. But in the sense, I know that just those conversations, those one-on-ones, or those small group conversations, I was able to bring information and logic to the minds of those who really cared, right? They cared. They just were equipped with incorrect or not enough information. And so I agree with you, Chandra. We need to be better about engaging local level politics, school board, paying attention, reading the minutes from the school board meetings, all of those things. Like, don't assume anything.
There's an organization. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah.
But there's an organization called Educators for Excellence, and they have branches. There's New York branch. There's a Minneapolis branch. I don't know where Los Angeles, Boston, and DC. Minneapolis, Prince. You got to give props to Prince. But but they're and sometimes if you trace the money, I'm not sure what group it comes from, but I'd say what's the information and the resources they can provide you. And also, they've made a concerted effort to become an anti-racist organization. So when I first got involved with it, it definitely wasn't. I was a minority, quote unquote, minority in America, but being involved with it. But I came back to it like right before the pandemic, and it definitely had changed, and they changed the policy, and they made a whole shift. But they empower teachers. So, and also they have resources. So sometimes you could just go there because you need copies made, or sometimes you could go there because you want coffee or you want a colleague that you can commiserate with. But they also take political action. They bring in people in power. They bring in political speakers. They had like the chancellor there before. So, and they do these in these chapters all over. So there's organizations out, like those days of us being, like I said, in that quiet desperation are over. They have to, like you said, you have to be actively engaged and advocate and push to get people to represent our voice, and not just when it's convenient for them when it's election time, but consistently. So definitely people have to like look outside themselves and see that they're a bunch of organizations. Also holding the union accountable. The UFT definitely, endorses candidates. Why are we endorsing this candidate? What's this candidate's platform? Right. Let's really take a vote, not just the top level of the UFT or the AFT or the different teacher unions. Membership has to be active. They take the dues out your salary, so out your paycheck. So definitely have a voice. So there's agency out there waiting to be activated and actualized. It's just sometimes we on treadmills. Sometimes we're not able to really function, which is one of the things like we've been making a big push for self-care and also looking at, like, there's a school that we partner with. I love what this principal does. First year teachers have one less teaching period than other teachers, because he wants them onboarded and he doesn't want to overwhelm them in his first year. Principal Afriye, he's in Harlem at a really good school. He took over like the fourth worst in terms of crime statistics, worst safest campus, and it's now like a great school. So so those transformative leaders, like sometimes that go overlooked, that people don't know. So just really doing some really good practices. So that's the other cool part about building these partnerships, going to these schools, and also trusting them to hire our teachers, really checking in to see how our teachers are growing in the profession. So like when you see these things, you definitely salute and shout them out and recognize them. So it's like, like you just really have to put yourself out there. But also, I don't know if people are built to teach 20 and 30 years like a past generation. Because I mean, honestly, I only taught 6 years and it was time to transition into other things. Like I've been in education collectively or youth development for over 3 decades, but I had a data exploration in the classroom. It was just like, because I couldn't bring that same fire and energy. And like, if I'm saying you either get better or get over, the days when I felt like I couldn't get better, I was like, it's over for me and I need to transition and do other things. So we have to recognize that within ourselves, that sometimes you can't relight that fire.
But you could be like that fire if you had a principle like the one you referenced. If we weren't having people start and try to work an entire career, pedal to the metal, without the opportunity for self-care, without the opportunity for taking a sick day without getting a side eye. This is why you had an expiration date.
True. And again, because of the pivot to leadership, the pivot to being a dean, definitely, like, and so when I advise the young men or just the male Black and brown teachers, I'm always like, be wary of that, because I should have became more steeped in my pedagogy or my practice instead of just like, oh, let me help out. And I mean, in the short term, it was the right move because my school needed that, and I reduced suspensions because it was like, no, we keeping you in school, we're not sending you out of school. Right. And I did a lot of restorative things, but it didn't really help my career in terms of like developing my craft. And so those are things where I'm always like, well, think about this and why are you doing this and what are the ramifications, and just really like respond instead of reacting to things.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, Kenney, I was about to say, could you say it louder for the folks in the back row? Because some people ain't listening, right? When you talk about these innovative school leaders who say, you know what, that first year teacher needs one less class, one less period. There's an idea. Let's try not to put them on committees when they just rolled up into this piece, right? And they're trying to get situated. Um, so I have a special place in my heart for teacher self-care because I do believe that it is part of the key for longevity. Maybe not in the classroom, but longevity in education, in the field in general. And I do think that we need to treat our novice teachers differently than we treat our veterans. It is just insane that we have the same expectations. What other profession in the world would do that? And you want to know why? You burning folks out in their third year. You know, they're tired. And I will say, G, that I'm not convinced that those folks who are coming in now, we should do a survey, will be here in 10, 15 years if education continues in the way that it is currently going. Because I'm pretty sure if I came in right now, like this is year 24 for me. If I came in right now and I looked around and said, I got to do this for 20 more years like this.
But that's my point. Not only do I not think that they will make it, but not make it given all that they're expected to do without
That's right.
there being some consideration for them as the whole person.
That's right.
That's that's really what I'm saying.
That's right. I mean, God forbid we actually think of teachers as human beings. I mean,
But that's where you get into me. We have to use our voice. We Chandra's all about teacher self-care. I'm all about empowerment. We have to use our voice, not just on the picket lines. We have to communicate our needs. We have to communicate our wants, and we have to be willing to do the work to make that happen.
Right.
And so it's a shame that it took me to be in my, 18, 19, 20th year to realize that I did have a voice. But when you think about the example that Kenney gave, where he had been nurtured by these skilled teachers and then they were gone.
That's right.
That happens. That first year teacher who, was really clinging, really learning, then a year or two later, the person they were clinging to is gone. Now they're left with the burden. But maybe you need to say to your administrator, I can't carry that burden. I'm still learning. I need to be able to go to a conference. Can you fund me to go to a conference? Like, ask the questions, seek the support. I'm about to get riled up. Let me just.
But also, you're speaking also to the way we enter the profession, because I think like a lot of us, you and I mean, even when I was a first year teacher, one of the things I confronted my principal because she yelled at me in front of the students, and I didn't do it at that moment, but that next morning, and I wasn't normally an early riser, but I was there like 6:30.
Come on.
And, saying, can we have a word? And it was just like, I'm not here to say I'm not perfect. I'm trying to be better every day. But if you yell at me, I'm going to tune that out. That's not the best way to get something across to me, and definitely in front of my students. Can we, can you just say, hey, Mr. Robinson, I need to talk to you, and after school, or, just something like, that's not cool. And we were fine after that. And, when people always like, wow, you said that? And it was like, yeah, or something happened even at our college. And I remember saying something to the president, just with all due respect, you considered the perspective of faculty and you didn't really consider the staff perspective. And she was like, well, you know what? You were right. I didn't do that. And so you can't be afraid to, say, hey, I have a point to make. And, if you say it with conviction and you're right, what can a person say? And then that's telltale to you. If the person can't own that, maybe that's not a person you want to work for.
That's right.
Right there.
That's it. You said it wonderfully. I hope people caught on to that, because you were talking about first year you had to address that behavior. Mm-hmm. Then you were talking about when you worked at the college. So you're talking about a span of probably 10 to 20 years.
Yep.
The difference. But you started early. That was some on the inside of you. But for some, if you don't have it on the inside, you could get it. It just
but
takes
Georgia,
practice and nurturing.
but I think we get it. Like that came from, well, first of all, I guess my household too, but also college. Like in college, we had to speak to the president. We had to protest to get like tables for Black Solidarity Dinner, or just different things with administrators. So it was like practice and leadership. So I think the model that we use to identify teachers, grade point average is good, but I want to see a well-rounded candidate where an athlete, because you had other responsibilities. Were you in student government? Were you in leadership? What else did you do besides focus on your grades? So sometimes those aren't the people who are best equipped to be teachers sometimes. So even how we bring people into the profession and some of the metrics we use, we need to be more holistic. And it's ironic that a lot of points that we're saying we need to happen isn't modeled. So that's my whole thing. Like you have to model what you want the people, your students to be, or what you want your educators to be. And I do think it's getting better in many aspects, because pre-COVID, nobody really even cared about how teachers were treated and everything. So
right there.
That's like, since COVID, people do care. They're like, oh, you need time off. We're gonna give you time off. You need this. We're gonna do that and everything. So it's gotten better, but just because it's gotten better, we don't need to pop bottles yet. We still have, a long way to go. It's sort of like a preacher. I remember a sermon, A.R. Bernard saying something like, don't hug the sign. Because when you get to a place, when you get to Philadelphia and you see the sign, that's not Philadelphia. That's just the sign telling you this is Philadelphia, but you're not in Philadelphia proper. So, we got a long way to go on this journey, but hopefully the arrow is turning up and we can maintain this momentum. But we have to just do that in society in general.
Yes.
I'm sitting here. I know I'm not your parent. I'm your sister, Kenney, but I'm sitting here thinking about how early on you talked about an English teacher who spoke ill of you, and you have dropped more quotes. You are the example that people need to remember. When you speak, you don't know who you speaking to. When you speaking to these students, you are managing a major program. You are instilling and inspiring and supporting work in the community. And I'm grateful you didn't let that teacher's word stop you. But we, the educators that are sitting here today, I know this brother from undergrad. He was the president of the Black Student Union. And so he didn't just start learning how to talk. And so all of these experiences, all of the journey was all well intended. And I'm very proud of you. I'm breaking script, but I'm very proud of you. And I think I'm saying it because I've been sitting here the entire time disgusted at that teacher, but just we do not know who is before us. And it is so important as educators to speak life into the students that we are working with, because they can be the Kenney Robinson at another university. They could be the Chandra Joseph-Lacet. We don't know who we're instilling, who is looking at us. And so I just wanted to say that I'm just thrilled about, I was a fan, but I'm thrilled to know that those young people you're working with at Hunter get this kind of nurture that we didn't get when we were in undergrad. It just, we had those 5 Black faculty, those 5, faculty from our different departments that nurtured. Every department only had 2 or 3 that, were in there for their students. And so we wore them out. And so now we all could be a part. They don't have to wait till they get to college. We could be a part of that throughout all of their years. So thank you for just modeling that, and that you're here with us today, just instilling and inspiring us as educators. Thanks.
Well, I have to also give props in that situation. First of all, with my mother, because my mother was constantly getting at her. Because like you said, I was reading, like my favorite book that year was Gordon Parks' A Choice of Weapons. Gordon, and but that we weren't reading that in her class and stuff. So I was doing a lot of reading. It just wasn't stuff that she was, giving us. So my mother, but also the guidance counselor, Mr. Holly, and the principal, Mr. Linden. I'm not going to give her name because I'm not going to, give her that shine. But they for whatever their reasons are, like I always laugh because I'm like looking back and seeing how schools work. I was the only kid to test into a specialized high school. So there's a part of me that's like, I know they might have done it for good reasons, but how does it look if nobody from your school went to a specialized high school and the kid who could was shut down by? So however it happened, I thank God that it did and everything. But you know, you don't do this alone. Like there's so many people who helped in the journey. You know, like, and I was just nurtured at New Paltz, not just Black Studies, but EOP, Tom Morales, like the fraternity. You know, the Kappa Alpha Psi. You know, but also all the fraternities, because I remember I met an Alpha last week. He works in the Department of Ed, who's Claudio Collins' nephew. Who and I was telling him about Brentley Cheeks, you know, used to have a temp agency. His aunt used to run a temp agency, so he used to hook all of us up with jobs, no matter who we were. So you know, it's just all of that just helps you get that sense of community, and also encourages you to pay it forward. So you know, I've been having a blessed life, and if I could make sure I empower and inspire people moving forward, you know, that's who I am. I might not, you know, like I laugh and tell students like, you know, maybe I'm Moses. I might not get to that promised land and everything because people sleep. You know, Moses got the 10 Commandments and all of that, but he didn't go to the promised land. It was Aaron and who led them to the promised land. But I've helped a lot of people get there, and I'm appreciative of that. And, you know, and I'm appreciative of you're giving me an opportunity to just share, you know, some thoughts and ideas.
And we appreciate you being here tremendously. And yes, D9 shout out, most definitely, D9. And, you know, G, you talked about being frustrated by that teacher, right? And Kenney, you being the inspiration for many. And I just want to say to some of our young people who may in fact be watching, be inspired, be motivated, despite
that's right,
what some educator, somebody, some person said that you can't do. There are 15,000 other people who know that you can. Find those people, lean into them, lean into the spirit that is in you. Don't let that naysayer define who you are. You get to write your story. And what do you say all the time, G? You get to choose.
You do get to choose. You get to choose who you're going to be with. You get to choose who you're not going to be with. Absolutely.
That's right. And who you are going to be in this work.
Yes.
This is great. Absolutely great.
Oh my God. So we gotta just tell a little bit. I'm trying to get this on here. We are Chandra and Gorgette, of course, but we have Real Talk, Real Time Educators Forum on Facebook. So if you're an educator and you want to engage in conversation and have a community of K-12 and college educators, we invite you to join us. We also have another show that we call The Passion Project. We feature teachers who share their passions that are both inside and outside of the classroom. And so, you know, sometimes the other day, Chandra and I were talking, and Chandra was saying, you know, why us, right? And she says, I know the answer. It's why not you? And so we came together to make a forum for teachers in the midst of the pandemic. We've been doing this since March 2020. We haven't slowed down. We're not turning back because just as Kenney said, now everyone realizes the importance of teacher self-care and teacher empowerment. And so we are here for it. We are here for you. And we are hoping that we cling in here together, because the only way this will work is if we do it together. You know, find your tribe and keep on trucking. So, Kenney, any parting words?
Well, I definitely want to just give people a couple of resources, especially with their job search related. There's this organization called the American Association for Employment and Education that Hunter College we're a member of. And one of the things they provide is this job search handbook. They offer free professional development. I mean, we pay for membership, but they offer free professional development, and they have reduced rates for young people. So I would strongly encourage them, AAEE, American Association for Employment and Education. And there's this organization called Selected that I love them. That one of the people who created the algorithm used to work for OkCupid. So we kind of affectionately say it's dating for teachers. but they're in a number of cities. And if you submit your resume to them, you fill out a number of questions and they match you with schools, and schools can identify you and select you. And like the students who do it with Fidelity at Hunter, 85% of them get placed in jobs. So we try to partner. We know we can't do this alone. Like anybody who thinks they can do this by themselves is foolish. So we try to partner with as many organizations to get as many resources and opportunities in front of our students. So that, definitely just understand, collaborate, and also, get that self-care that you all offer. So definitely a shout out to you all for the work that you do. And I encourage people to follow you all.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank
So what
you.
we're going to do, this was also live on our YouTube channel, and we'll add to the show notes some of those resources that Kenney offered. And hopefully you'll feel free to share this episode. It was wonderful.
Well, thank you all. Like, I really appreciate this. And hey, anytime I could be of support or service, I'm here for you. And again, I appreciate the work that you all do, and I pray that you get the nourishment and the inspiration you need to keep trucking on and pushing that rock up, like vociferous, pushing that rock up and everything.
Indeed. So we went over a little bit, but it was well worth it. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Reflections from the Heart with Chandra and Gorgette. We wish you well, and until next time, goodbye.
Until next time.